Good afternoon. Welcome to the live stream. My name is Sean Duffy, and I am the host. Next week on this channel, you will hear from Dr. Gerald Lee from West Liberty University, who will be celebrating the 250th birthday of Beethoven, and will play some of Beethoven's music for us. So that'll be next week at noon on Lunch with Books live stream. Today, we have with us Rabbi Lief, Rabbi Joshua Leaf from Temple Shalom. He is the rabbi at Temple Shalom, the very congregation where he grew up here in Wheeling. He attended Princeton University, where he graduated with a degree in history. After Princeton, Rabbi Lief attended the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. He lived in Jerusalem for the first year of seminary, completed his studies at JIR's campus in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he was ordained as a rabbi in May of 2003. Since returning to Wheeling, Rabbi Lief has been active in the city's revitalization efforts through the support of arts, business development, parks, public education, and interfaith engagement. He is here today to present a program on winter holidays. Please welcome Rabbi Lief.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored. I cannot tell if anyone is watching. It's very odd speaking to my computer screen, but hopefully we can enjoy it. If there is anyone out there paying attention, then hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation, and afterwards I'm more than happy to answer any questions that I can. So, first of all, it is the holiday season, and as such, we ought to ask ourselves, what holidays are we celebrating? In our Jewish community, Hannukah will begin this Thursday evening, December the 10th, when the sun sets. All Jewish holidays start in the evening and continue through the next day. Hanukkah is an 8-night festival, so it'll continue all through next week. And for our Christian friends, any Christians in the crowd? Probably so, I'm guessing. Then you're well aware that Christmas is coming up not that far behind either. So let's take a look today at some of the symbols of these two winter holidays to see where commonalities lie and what the differences between them might be. So I've entitled a little slideshow for you, Through the Darkness a Light, a deeper look at familiar symbols. So let's take a look together. I think that Sean's controlling the slides, so let's go. Okay, first question. Is the winter holiday season a secular celebration? Here we see the national tree in front of the Capitol, and I would argue it cannot be. It cannot be a secular celebration because, next slide. Next slide. Holidays are holy days, hence the name. So if it's holy, there must be something religious about it. So when we look at this card, this is a Happy Holidays card. What do we notice? Well, we notice some of the imagery and we notice the colors. So first, the imagery. I'm going to go with the icicle forming. For those of us with children, I immediately think of Frozen and the snowflake shapes in frost drawings. And we see a dark blue, sort of a lighter blue and gold. When we think of a holiday with blue and gold as its color scheme, maybe I'm biased, but I don't think Christmas. I think Hanukkah. But, next slide. When we see a teddy bear wearing a Santa hat riding on a candy cane that's red and white and green and says Happy Holidays, I'm not thinking Hanukkah. I'm thinking pretty strongly Christmas. Let's go on. If we saw a tree with some snowflakes in red and white, it says Happy Holidays, but I'm thinking Christmas. If we see holly branches, red, green, white, that sure may say Happy Holidays, but is pretty biased in favor of Christmas. And of course, the pièce de résistance. I love the sparkling, isn't it? Isn't it lovely? The little lamb wearing the Santa hat. You've got the holly berries. Happy holidays. Now, what holiday could we be referring to if not Christmas? When we think about the holidays, the winter holidays, they have very specific themes, and the themes have some color significance to them. We're going to see some of the evidence of that coming up, but suffice it to say, for our Christian friends, who probably are the majority of the audience today, red is, of course, for the blood of Jesus, white for purity, and green for resurrection. When we think about Hanukkah, we usually think of the blue as more of a either literally gold, and that will come into play in a moment, or the brightness of the candles flickering against the night sky. So these cards may all say on them, but which holidays they're referring to does not seem equally balanced. Let's go on to the next slide. So, Festival of Light. Here we see some shining gold lights on some oil lamps. And if you're thinking Hanukkah, you're wrong. That's Diwali. That's an Indian festival, also in the wintertime, also about light against the darkness. It's a very old concept that people in the shortest days of the year, that is to say the winter when the night comes earliest and lasts the longest, the temperatures are coldest, we want something to brighten our literal darkness, but also our figurative darkness, to have something joyful and happy and celebratory in the middle of the winter keeps seasonal affective disorder away long before psychology and psychiatry were recognized sciences. People understood that it can get depressing when the nights are long and dark and the weather is cold. You need something to brighten your life. So let's go on. Next slide. Festival of Light. This is one of my favorites. Let Freedom Ring. Light Parade saved. This was a community that had a river parade where boats would be decked out with lights, and there was a real risk. The city is short on funds and they wanted to cancel the light parade, and the residents went nuts and raised several tens of thousands of dollars to enable the light parade to continue. Next slide. My all-time favorite of that was Pirate Xmas. Yes, that's a lovely yacht decorated with lights to celebrate the holiday season. Nothing says joy and holiness like Pirate Xmas. Well, obviously, if we're going with the X, that's from Chi, the Greek letter representing the cross. That's not Hanukkah. Let's go to the next slide. How about this Festival of Light? Everyone loves National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Is that the light to literally make the wheel on your power meter go round and round and round in circles? Next one. Ah, that's a lovely festive home. We see some red, some green, some snowmen in there. I think gaudiness and over the top is the theme of that light display. Next one. Ah, this is a good one. You've got the Christmas tree elements and some reindeer, a crown for the newborn king, and lovely down there in the corner, a Jewish star. I love that one. Next one. This one literally hits close to home. This is my house. This is our family home. We decorate with lights, but notice we're going with blue. Blue is more of a Hanukkah-themed color than some of our neighbors who have red and green. We went with blue. Next one. Ah, now that's an honest light display. To my Christian friends who say, keep the Christ in Christmas, I say, I agree wholeheartedly. Let's not pretend that it's something that it isn't. Christmas, of course, is a religious holiday, so too is Hanukkah. And Jesus is the reason for the season for our Christian friends. You've got white and red and green, the three critical colors for any Christmas display. Next one. Now this one should look familiar to a lot of us. A blue and white. I love this. And winter snowflake symbols, not giving away any particular holiday allegiance. You can see this one at the corner of Bethany Pike and National Road, just down the street from us at Temple, on the lawn from our friends at Kepner. It's been there for quite a while, but not quite as long as the next one. That's our Shalom menorah here at Temple Shalom. Ever since the very second year of Oglebay having the Festival of Lights, we've been proud to be a participant. And ours, blue and gold with a menorah, clearly Hanukkah. And we even light each of the candles as the nights of Hanukkah continue. First night, second night, third night, the additional lights on the menorah come on until the end of Hanukkah, whenever it may be. Some years, it relative to the to our secular calendar appears to be early or late. It's always on the 25th of Kislev on our Jewish lunar calendar every year, but how it appears to the rest of the world, sometimes early, sometimes late. We light the candles on the appropriate nights, and then we leave all 9 candles lit through the end of whenever. The real Festival of Lights is, of course, Hanukkah. It's the original. Christmas is just about 2,000 plus years old. Hanukkah is a couple centuries earlier. In the 2nd century before the Common Era, the Jews rebelled against the Seleucid Greeks who had outlawed the practice of Judaism, and they fought for their religious freedom. So the original Festival of Light is ours, even older than Oglebay. I know, hard to believe that anyone beat Oglebay to the punch, let alone Christianity. Judaism is a little bit older than either of them. Next slide. So here's the original Festival of Light, right? There's your classic Hannukah. A menorah, a 7-branched candelabra, is the oldest symbol of Judaism, representing the Sabbath. But this 9-branched candelabra is unique to Hanukkah to commemorate the story from 2nd Maccabees and 1st Maccabees to a lesser extent in the Apocrypha, not in the Bible, the story that after the Jews won, they made it to the temple in Jerusalem and it was a mess. The Greeks had desecrated it with pagan sacrifices to the Greek deities, including a statue of Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, the Seleucid king, who fancied himself Zeus incarnate and made statues of himself as Zeus. And they had put one of those up at the temple in the Holy of Holies where the Ark had been, apparently, according to the story there in Apocrypha. And all of the vials of oil had been desecrated, so they couldn't relight the famous 7-branched menorah that we read about in the book of Exodus, and later the one that King Solomon built in the book of Kings. They couldn't relight that, and they found one tiny little vial of oil, so the story goes. And the miracle is that it lasted for 8 nights, even though it was a tiny amount of oil. The problem is that story is not actually found in the Apocrypha. The story of the victory and the rebellion is. The story of the oil is found many years later, centuries in fact, in the Talmud, 5th century Code of Jewish Law, an added Hanukkah ritual because the rabbis of the Talmud have a hard time glorifying the Maccabees, and we'll talk about why in a moment. Next slide. Hanukkah is a festival of hope. Here we see some dreidels, the 4-sided top with Hebrew letters on it. From right to left, Hebrew goes right to left, we see Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin. Nes Gadol Haya Sham in Hebrew is the expression, a great miracle happened there. Actually, dreidels made in the land of Israel have a different letter. It says Nes Gadol Haya Po, a great miracle happened here. The great miracle, of course, is either the oil lasting or the victory. And which one it is depends on which story you like better. And in fact, the original story is not the oil at all. It's the victory. Let's go on to the next slide. The Maccabees. The Maccabean Miracle, of course, is the story of Hannukah, that the Jews were oppressed by the Greeks. Hellenism is an all-encompassing approach to religiosity and culture. And if we read the story in First Maccabees, the Greeks really wanted everyone to give up their own cultural practices and participate in Hellenistic society. And the Jewish community was, in fact, bitterly divided. Within the Jewish community, they were not homogeneous in rejecting the Hellenists. They were split. Some Jews were willing to give up their Judaism and go along with the Greek gods and Greek culture. And a smaller portion, actually, of the Jewish community was the group that decided to rebel. The rebellion is started in Modi'in, town just north of Jerusalem, in which there lived a priestly family. The father of the family is named Mattathias. He was a local dignitary of some renown. And the Greek authorities came to every town across Judea and set up statues of Antiochus dressed as Zeus to make people bow down to them, to swear their allegiance to Hellenism, as it were, and to Antiochus himself explicitly. And the story goes that Mattathias is the second one in line. The mayor of the town is first, Mattathias is second. And the mayor bows down to kiss the idol. Now, idolatry is one of very few offenses that Judaism says you absolutely cannot do. The three things that Judaism outlaws, that somebody says, I'm going to kill you unless you do this. Murder, top of that list. You can't kill somebody else to save your own life. Sexual immorality. Somebody says, sleep with your sister or I'll kill you. Sorry, not going to do that. And the third one is idolatry, because rejection of God would be rejecting the world as we see it. So idolatry is a death penalty offense. You'd rather die than do it. So when the mayor bows down to the idol, Mattathias kills him and then rallies the community and says, let all who wish to follow the Lord follow me, paraphrasing the famous line from the book of Joshua. When Joshua says, as for me and my house, we shall follow the Lord, Mattathias says, let all who wish to follow the Lord follow me. He and his 5 sons lead a rebellion. Others join them in a guerrilla war. Next slide. And they fight back. This is a children's version, a comic book style telling of the Maccabean story. Next one. My all-time favorite, Adam Goldberg, was, of course, wonderful as Mellish in Steven Spielberg's World War II epic Saving Private Ryan, but his greatest role of all time is as the Hebrew Hammer, made by Comedy Central many years ago, arguably the funniest Hannukah movie ever made. The Maccabees fight back and win. It isn't that they win in order to make the Greeks become Jews. It's not a war of conquest. It's really a war for their own religious freedom. And as such, it's an amazing story about a minority group who does not wish to torment the majority, who only wants to be free from being tormented by the majority. And that story is a powerful one still to the present day. We'll talk about why in a moment. Let's go on to the next slide. So how about that oil miracle? If the victory itself is the real original miracle of Hannukah, how does the oil story come about? And the answer is that after the Maccabees won, Mattathias dies. His son Judah Maccabee, the hero of the story, leads the rebellion. They win the war. He's a mighty warrior, but he and his brothers take turns after each one of them passes away at being the leaders. And eventually the family line sets itself up as high priests at the temple. This is problematic. They are a priestly family, but they are not in line to be the high priests. That's actually, if we read the story in Maccabees, how the whole mess begins. Antiochus himself, the king of the Seleucids, centered in Damascus in Syria, after Alexander's empire breaks into 4 parts, the community in the Holy Land pays its taxes to the Ptolemies down in Alexandria in Egypt, not north to the Seleucids in Damascus. When Antiochus takes the Seleucid throne, he wants to get the money, the gold and silver that he believes has been collected at the temple in Jerusalem by Jews who had sent their offerings from abroad. When people lived far away from Jerusalem, too far to bring animals for sacrifice, they would sell their animals back home and bring the cash to the temple and use it to buy a new animal at the temple and then make that as a sacrifice. The problem was that the coins, the physical gold and silver coins that they brought, could not be used as money anymore because they were representative of the sacrifice. So they were simply stored in storehouses. For our Christian friends following along, that famous story about Jesus flipping the tables of the money changers, that's a believable story. There were people who, like at the airport, converted your foreign currency to local currency so that you could buy your animals. The problem was all that money just went into giant storerooms at the temple complex. And so Antiochus wants to steal that money. And so he makes a deal with a man named Jason, who is in line to be high priest behind the legitimate high priest, Onias IV, that if he'll kick Onias out, Antiochus will make Jason the new high priest. Secretly, Jason's friend Menelaus, who is actually not a priest, has heard about this deal and offers to give Antiochus all the gold in the temple if he'll make him the high priest. So Jason convinces Onias to flee because the Seleucid army is coming. He flees down to Heliopolis in Egypt, where Onias IV lives in exile. Jason comes out to meet Antiochus there in Jerusalem, and Menelaus kills him on the steps of the temple and then gives Antiochus and the Greek Seleucid army free rein to steal and loot and pillage and desecrate the temple. Then the rebellion ensues. So ironically, when they win, the Maccabees do not send for Onias IV to bring him back and reestablish the correct line of the high priesthood. They make themselves high priests instead. That's not terrible, but the priesthood quits in rebellion. And for those of you who might be readers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is ample evidence, Giza Vermesh, in fact, has put forth the theory, that the community at Qumran may have actually been the supporters of Onias IV, who themselves had exiled themselves down to the Dead Sea. So the Maccabees declare themselves to be high priests. This is a problem. The bigger problem is they also make themselves kings. And there is an intentional separation of powers in Jewish history. The kings are descendants of David, therefore from the tribe of Judah. The priests are descendants of Aaron, and therefore from the tribe of Levi, and you're not supposed to be both at the same time. There is a separation of church and state, if you will, in this case, temple and state. And so the Maccabees have really been somewhat significantly naughty to make themselves kings. Their line, the Hasmonean line, ironically ends up with a non-Jew on the throne, Herod, who marries the last of the Hasmoneans. That same King Herod from the Christmas story. Ooh, amazing the tie-ins. He is the last of the line holding on to power there from the Maccabean days. And their kingship is really profoundly corrupt. So years later, when the rabbis of the Talmud are trying to explain why people should celebrate Hanukkah, they want to honor the Maccabees for fighting for religious freedom and throwing off Greek oppression and saving Judaism quite explicitly from destruction, but they don't want to glorify the behavior that they engaged in after making themselves illegitimate high priests and kings. So the rabbis of the Talmud make up the oil story, whole cloth, made up story. Next slide. However, there is some archaeological evidence. These are oil lamps from the Maccabean era taken from caves near Amatzia in modern-day Israel, where there's a number of archaeological digs from the Hasmonean era. And in fact, the Maccabees, during their guerrilla war against the Greeks, hid in these very shallow underground cave complexes. And we find these little oil lamps. Next slide. But the oil makes its way into our modern day observance of Hanukkah. in the form of foods fried in oil. Here we see latkes, the ultimate classic Hanukkah food. These are potato pancakes fried in oil. Next slide. But if you were in Israel, you would find jelly donuts, sufganiyot, to be the ultimate Hanukkah food. So what's going on? Well, it turns out it's even more diverse than that. Jews from North Africa, particularly Morocco and Tunisia, famously eat fried goat cheese discs called jabin al-makali. Jews from Persia ate holofernes, a cheesy, salty dough bread, because of a story in another book of the Apocrypha, Judith, also about the Hanukkah story where she tricks a Greek general into being thirsty by giving him salty dough, and then he drinks wine and she kills him. All these foods have one thing in common, and it isn't potatoes or jelly or cheese or salt, it's oil. They're all fried in oil because the oil story from the Talmud becomes the much more famous aspect of observance of Hanukkah, the lighting of the lights and the making of fried foods. Next slide. One could even argue that from an American perspective, fried chicken would be the ultimate Hanukkah food. Anything fried in oil would be a Hanukkah celebration because we're remembering the oil miracle. Next slide. So what is the real hope that we celebrate at Hanukkah? A great miracle happened there, Nes Gadol Hayah Sham. Well, for some of us, next slide, it's the hope that our Christian friends have also. At the darkest time of the year, you want something inspiring, something uplifting, something to give you an opportunity to look forward to the future. When we think about Christianity, there are two main holidays, and one is far more important than the other, though it doesn't get the credit it deserves. If you asked Christians what's the biggest holiday in terms of observance, they would probably say Christmas. If you asked Christian clergy what's the biggest holiday, theologically speaking, they would certainly say Easter, because it's the death of Jesus that gives Christianity its ultimate message, the triumph over death. And so the Christmas holiday is necessary because he has to be born in order to live and then die. So we see here the lamb, right? Of course, emblematic of Jesus. And we get those green and red and white lovely symbols for blood and purity and resurrection wrapped up in the guise. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't see a lot of baby lambs in the wintertime. Even though their fleece may be white as snow, they don't do so well in cold weather. Next slide. So the real hope is usually the hope of our children for presents. Here we have a lot in common. And if you're thinking to yourself that presents at Hanukkah time is a concession by Jewish parents to their children, seeing their Christian friends' children getting lots of gifts at Christmas time, you might be a little bit right, but not entirely, because, next slide, these are two lovely, horrifically anti-Jewish sentiments. Christmas quality Hanukkah pricing. That's a lovely ad for vodka, making fun of Jews for being greedy and venal. Always lovely at this time of year. Notice the red and white. Always a Christmas ad, not a Hanukkah ad. And the cartoon, which unfortunately shows up a little too small to read, is a boy who is Christian claiming to be observing Hanukkah also so that he'll get extra presents. And his friend says, dude, you're going to hell. Next slide. The Hanukkah gift giving is actually earlier than the Christmas one. Again, the Festival of Lights is an earlier festival. So too the gift giving because of the Gelt. Gelt is the Yiddish word for gold. It also gives rise to why gold is a popular Hanukkah color. These are those famous chocolate candies wrapped in gold foil that we like to give and share with our friends. But in fact, next slide, this is the original Gelt. These are Maccabean era coins that in fact give us an amazing insight into the ancient world. When we think about the Maccabean rebellion, the Hasmoneans win, right? They throw off the Greeks, they recapture Jerusalem, and they reestablish an independent Jewish kingdom. They make themselves the kings. That's questionable, but they need to get the word out that they have won. There's no television, internet, radio, newspapers, nothing. Money is the media of the ancient world. If you think about it, if you really want to get a message out and you're the government, you print coins and you give them out into as wide of a distribution as you possibly can, because the further the coins spread through commerce, the further your message will go. One need only think about our American coinage today. There's a picture of Washington on the $1 bill. Is it Washington the warrior? No, it's Washington the statesman. We're making a message with our money that we are a democracy and not warlike, but rather peace-loving. The money itself is the media. So too in the ancient world. The Hasmoneans printed coins, small coins, in copper and silver and even a few in gold, that had a picture of a pomegranate, and on it it said, "Jerusalem is free." And then they gave them out to all of their friends. So the giving out the coins is the original gift giving of Hanukkah. They gave coins to their friends. We remember the giving of coins with the gold coins. It's also a popular Hanukkah present to give money to children, $1 on the first night, $2 on the second night, $3 on the third night. My grandparents did that for me. The chocolate-covered gold coins are also nice. And in lieu of coins came the giving of physical presents and gifts. Next slide. Our Christian friends, of course, also have this same symbolism, because in the Christian story, the three kings, the Eastern kings, come bearing gifts for the little baby, birthday presents, if you will, of frankincense, myrrh, and of course, gold. Not a surprise. It makes a wonderful birthday present. Slightly better than frankincense and myrrh, some might argue, although in the ancient world, frankincense, very hard to come by, was actually quite expensive, more valuable than gold, some would say. Next slide. But for our Christian friends, that story gets replaced, if you will, with Jesus as the ultimate gift. So God gives Jesus to the world, and that begets people giving presents to their friends. So next slide. The most famous present of them all. The present giving is in common between the two holidays, but the reason for the giving of presents is not the same. So we see light in both holidays, but for different reasons. We see hope in both holidays, but for different reasons. We even see present giving in both holidays, but for different reasons. Next slide. So how about that lamb? Well, here's a picture of the little shepherd boy out in the field with his shepherd's crook, and there's the Star of Bethlehem, right? It's a lovely symbolism. But when are baby lambs born? And when are shepherds out in the fields? Next slide. Well, it's spring. And even the candy cane, in red and white, of course, for blood and purity, reminds us of the shepherd boy. When are new lambs born? Springtime. And what holiday famously has a lamb being slaughtered at a springtime festival other than Passover, the original springtime New Year on our Jewish calendar festival? Spring representing rebirth, renewal, the exodus from Egypt, marked in the 10th plague with the blood of the lamb on the doorposts of the Israelites' houses. And that is borrowed by our Christian friends. And a lot of Passover symbolism gets overlaid onto the Christian holiday of, turn the page, next slide, Easter. Here's the problem. As you can see, coming up this spring, Passover and Easter fall same time. And no one in creating a religion would be so foolish as to put both of their major holidays at the same season of the year. Why? That would be like putting Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur only 10 days apart. Oh, wait, that's what we did. So Christianity revises that system and intentionally separates Christmas from Easter, because technically Jesus's birth has to be a springtime occurrence, but they already have a big holiday in the spring. In fact, one that's theologically even more important for our Christian friends. So Christmas gets moved artificially to the winter because conveniently you need a holiday of hope and foreshadowing that says the winter, aka coldness, darkness, and death, will someday end in the spring, representing warmth, renewal, rebirth, and light. So for our Christian friends, those themes work out conveniently. It helps that the Romans already had a winter festival of Saturnalia that could be borrowed and overlaid when the Roman Empire switches from paganism to Christianity. Next slide. So when we think about that tree, that should give us the real linkage. There's that red and white tree. Anyone ever seen a red evergreen tree? No, of course, they're called evergreens because they're evergreen, not ever red. But white for the purity and red for the blood, green for the resurrection. Next slide. So it's syncretism. The Romans were incredibly successful as they conquered the world at getting the local peoples to adopt Roman worship, because the Romans would simply borrow the local symbols and add them to the Roman pantheon. They did this in Judea as well. When the Roman armies conquered the Holy Land, they offered sacrifices at our Jewish temple to our God to try and honor the local gods. They were disappointed when the Jews did not reciprocate by adopting Roman worship, mostly because we as Jews refused to participate in idolatry and polytheism. That was actually one of the precipitating factors in rebellion against Rome many years later, just as it was the reason the Jews had rebelled against the Greeks in the Hannukah story. But in Northern Europe, Britannia, Germania, Gaul, there were people who worshipped their local gods under magical trees that didn't lose their leaves in the winter. These folks had special worship places out in the forest under evergreen trees. So the Romans borrowed this and took the evergreen and added the local customs into Roman customs. We call this syncretism, when you borrow what the locals already do and make it part of your thing. Then, when Christianity becomes the official religion of the empire, next slide, we simply decorate that tree and make it a Christmas tree, because we already have the tree symbol. And when you add the Christmas story, you've got a tree that miraculously stays green. You decorate it with red and white baubles and decorations. And you've got the red for the blood, the white for the purity, and the green for the resurrection. The tree becomes the cross, kept evergreen by the resurrection itself. And so you get an amazing binding together of what people were already doing in Northern Europe with what Rome wanted them to do, with what Rome then becomes as Christianity, that endures even to the present day because it's so popular and easily adaptable and adoptable. Next symbol. The holly wreath. Again, the folks in Northern Europe believed the holly had special properties, significant properties, because its leaves stay green and its berries actually bloom in the wintertime. It's a rare plant that has winter blooms. And those little red berries and those sharp, prickly holly leaves, we had a holly bush in front of our last home, and it was very unpleasant when you would be trimming it and fall into it. Those are sharp, and they remind us of, next slide, the crown of thorns. And so again, syncretism, borrowing the symbol that people already liked, the holly as a magical bush, and replacing that magic and paganism, if you will, with explicit Christianity, making the linkage that the holly leaves are the thorns and the berries are the drops of blood, and then people decorate their doorway at Christmas time with a holly wreath to say to those passing by, I am an observer of this holiday. I'm practicing Christianity. Just as we Jews put the mezuzah on our doors to remember the story of the blood on the doors at Passover. It's a public affirmation of one's faith with symbols that would be easily recognizable to anyone passing by. Next symbol. Okay, let's have a quiz. Name a character who wears a red suit. Next. Is always watching you. Next. Offers gifts based on your behavior. Has 5 letters in his name, an S, 2 A's, an N, and a T. And the answer is George Burns, right? So it's Satan, of course. Satan has a red suit. It's always watching, offers gifts to try and lure you into being naughty. And that's how you spell his name, S-A-T-A-N, right? No? Isn't that right? Oh, look, Lindemann Elementary, Allen Park Public Schools says Breakfast with Satan coming up on December 14th. I don't know if that was just a typo or not, was it? Next one. Oh, there he is, the pitchman for Coca-Cola. The famous Coca-Cola Santa Claus. Why is he wearing red and white? Because that's Coke's colors. Coke invented this advertising campaign back in the 1930s, and it continues to the present day because coincidentally, the colors of Christmas happen to be the colors of Coke. That picture of Santa Claus is an advertisement for Coca-Cola that has become universally accepted as the image of Santa, but in fact is relatively recent in the grand scheme of things. When we go, next slide, when we think about the actual St. Nicholas of Myra, he's from Asia Minor, from modern-day Turkey, and he's the patron saint of children, and particularly children who are poor. He brings them presents because they don't have very much. And so St. Nicholas becomes, particularly in the Dutch tradition, next one, Sinterklaas. His story in the Dutch Sinterklaas is actually that he's from Spain, not from Turkey, and that he'll take naughty children away from their homes back to Spain with him if they don't behave, but good children will get presents and toys. And Sinterklaas becomes, of course, Santa Claus, and he has a sidekick. That's Schwarze Peter. Black Peter in the Dutch Santa Claus story, that's Santa's sidekick. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, that's offensive, next slide, you're not wrong. It is offensive. And even in the Netherlands, there have been widespread protests to get rid of Schwarze Peter, the black-faced character, as the slave sidekick to Santa Claus. The only problem is Santa Claus brings the toys, Black Peter brings the cookies. So Christmas cookies is inextricably connected to Black Peter. This is a real problem for those baking at home to give cookies to all your friends. Please, whatever you do, do not dress up in blackface. Nobody thinks that's appropriate. Next. So here's the real question. The holidays have a lot of symbols in common. Christmas has light, the famous Star of Bethlehem, the lighting up of homes, the decorating with lights. Hannukah has light because of the oil miracle and the menorah. Both holidays have gift giving at their core. Hannukah has the Gelt because of the Maccabean story of passing out the coins and the money that becomes the giving of presents. And the Christmas story has the giving of presents because the kings bring presents and Jesus is the present. Both have food, symbolic foods. Hanukkah has everything fried in oil. Christmas has a whole host, depending on where you're from. Christmas special bouche de Noël and cookies and so on and so forth, because we're supposed to eat and be joyous and have a celebration at the darkest time of the year to bring ultimately the light of hope to our friends and our family and even our communities. The issue is that the underpinnings of the two holidays is different. Christianity is bringing hope about resurrection and salvation. Judaism is bringing hope about freedom and the opportunity for all of us to practice our own faith in a meaningful way without being dominated by a majority culture. Here's the ultimate irony. Just as the Jews had to rebel against the Hellenists, an all-encompassing popular culture that claimed to be secular but was in fact religious and wished to dominate the Jewish community and compel everyone to join with them in celebrating, so too we live in an overwhelming popular culture where the public does something that is a vast majority, and we as a tiny minority are trying to just be asked to do our own thing and not be forced to go along with something that is overtly religious and absolutely not secular. So ironically, Hanukkah as a minor festival has taken on major significance because it's a Jewish statement that we do not wish to compel our friends to join us. Judaism doesn't proselytize, just that we wish to be allowed to keep being ourselves. What a powerful message to that lonely Jewish kid in the classroom when everyone's told to draw their picture of Santa Claus in public school and make a list of what they hope Santa will bring them, and everything is red and white and green. These colors have religious significance. They are not empty and hollow. So can you do both? Here, we're back to where we started with holiday cards. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. Two lovely snowmen, one blue and white and gold, one red and green and white. Obviously, the two holidays side by side. Lovely. Next slide. Now we're getting a little fuzzier. Can you do both? Happy Christmanica, with a Christmas tree on one side, a menorah on the other, and green and gold. Green, one of the Christmas colors, gold, one of the Hanukkah colors. But the merging of the two is unsettling. When you see this card, does it make you feel a little uncomfortable? Probably not as uncomfortable as the picture of Schwarzer Peter earlier, but it's not great. Next one. It's getting worse. Here's Christmaka, a Jewish star interset with a Christmas tree and the Star of Bethlehem atop it. Notice that is not a Jewish star. That's a 5-pointed star inside the 6-pointed star. An implication that there is a link. And for those of us who perhaps incorrectly believe that Hanukkah is the Jewish Christmas, it isn't. This kind of a card would be misleading. So let's get to the brass tacks of it all. Next one. Can you do both? Well, if they stand side by side, sure. But is Hanukkah about competing with Christmas? Ultimately, no. Hanukkah is about the Jewish community fighting for its religious freedom as a minority, not to become the majority, not to demand even equal footing. This is foolish. We're well aware that we're a tiny minority, and we as a Jewish community are okay with that. All we ask is not to dominate the majority and force them to approve of us, but rather to be allowed the freedom, just as our ancestors, the Hasmoneans, fought for their freedom, to be allowed to keep practicing Judaism even while our neighbors do something else. Last one. So that's what I hope to bring to us today. The light of freedom and the light of hope, both made ever brighter by the light of knowledge. That we should understand the meanings of the symbols between these two holidays, which are connected in that the symbols have been borrowed and then changed to be uniquely Christian, just as they are uniquely Jewish with different meanings. If we understand how we are different, then we can each celebrate our own holidays in meaningful ways and, living here in the United States in a free society, share with our neighbors that which is meaningful to us without trying to force them to become us. That's arguably the best takeaway message from this Hanukkah season. To wish our Christian friends a Merry Christmas for those who observe it, and a Happy Hanukkah to those of us who are celebrating it. and to share openly and freely our various customs and rituals and traditions and symbols. You don't have to send anyone a happy holidays card, as we saw at the beginning. Wish people a happy whatever it is that they celebrate, and hopefully they'll do the same for you in return. I think that's the last slide. So thank you so much. And now I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, though I'm not sure how I get those questions. So Sean, tell me what the questions are, and I'll be delighted to try and answer. I hope you enjoyed our little presentation. Oh, a question. All right. Aaron Rotherbuehler asks, so are all the similarities between Hanukkah and Christmas another example of syncretism for early Jewish converts to Christianity? Do early Christians continue celebrating Hanukkah in the early centuries of Christianity? Okay, so great question. There is no doubt that the nascent Christians were all Jews, right? The moral exemplar of the New Testament story is a lifelong practicing Jew. That's Jesus, for those of you New Testament readers in the crowd. He's Jewish his entire life. There is no such thing as Christianity till after he dies. His early followers, the disciples, are all Jews. And after his death, in the decades that follow, slowly but surely, by the late first century of the Common Era, there is a beginning effort to spread that message to the non-Jewish community, because the Jewish community has been openly disdainful. It's why Matthew is so frustrated, because the Jews aren't going along, and why Luke has a non-Jewish target audience. So by the second century of the Common Era, there's a new thing called Christianity that is unique and separate and different from Judaism, but it's really muddled up until that point. And Christianity takes and borrows a lot of symbols from Judaism. Certainly when we think about our Jewish ritual of Kiddush, sanctification of our holidays, with a glass of wine, our symbol of joy. We have a cup, it has wine in it, we say a blessing, and we declare the holiday to be beginning. Our Christian friends take the exact same symbol, glass, wine in it, blessings, holiness, all the same themes, and completely rearrange them and make, for our Catholic friends, communion, right? Where the wine is holiness, and by drinking it, you become holy. So same symbol, totally new meaning. The borrowing and transforming is a crucial part of the early framework of Christianity, not surprisingly, because the earliest Christians are Jews. Do they explicitly borrow from the Hanukkah story, or is it coincidental? Well, that's a tough one, because putting Christmas in the winter does not look accidental. That said, everyone historically, throughout the ages, we saw the Diwali lamp earlier, everyone needs something to bring light to the darkest time of the year. It's a difficult time, and people get sad, and people need to be cheered up. And so a holiday that's about light and happiness and joy and food and presents and hope, especially hope, whether that's the hope of freedom or the hope of freedom from death, freedom literally of religion and independence versus freedom from death. Hanukkah's bigger parallel, I would say, for a modern holiday is the 4th of July, not Christmas. But Christianity does happen to borrow a lot of the same symbols. I can't say it's an explicit taking and borrowing. And I'm not sure that it's syncretism in the same way that the Roman borrowing of Britannia and Germania's symbols is then explicitly overlaid with Christianity to make Christmas symbols that we see to this day. There certainly are elements, but it's not as one-to-one. Next question. It's a great question. Next question. Next question. I'm ready. Fire away, but I don't see anything coming up. Some may have gone past. Can I recommend a book? Can I recommend a book about Hanukkah? I would say from a pragmatic point of view, first of all, if you happen to have a Catholic Bible, it has the Apocrypha in it. And if not, you can get a book, a collection, J.P.V.D. Charlesworth's The Apocrypha, always a good choice from a scholarly point of view. He has good notes in it. If you can read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, 1st Maccabees is more of an historical perspective. 2nd Maccabees takes much more of a heavy theological overlay. It's like the difference in the Bible between Kings and Chronicles. They tell the same story, but from one from a historical perspective and one from a theological loaded perspective. Chronicles and 2nd Maccabees would be the parallel where anything good happens because a person is good and anything bad happens because a person is evil, whereas 1st Maccabees and Kings, it's more of a this battle and this king and that king and so on and so forth. So whether you want the straight history or not, then you look at Jude as well from the Apocrypha, and you get a wonderful simply tale. Charakover's Helen and the Jews. Charakover is the ultimate authority on this period in history. Charakover's book is magnificent. So that'd be really the best. Victor Charakover, Hellenism and the Jews, that's really your best option for a great, just truly great. Biederman's good as well. That's a good one. Nicholsburg is more accessible, available in paperback. Charakover, I'd go with that. You're safe. And if you want to read the primary sources, always go to the primary sources. Start with 1st and 2nd Maccabees.
Rabbi,
those are a few good suggestions, I think.
Thank you. The
yes,
video,
sir.
Yeah, the video froze right as you were doing that last recommendation. If you wouldn't mind repeating it.
Oh,
one more time. I'm not sure.
Wait 1 second.
Okay.
Grab. Oh, where is it? Didn't think to grab it earlier.
Whoops, there it is. Victor Charakover, Hellenistic Civilization and the Jews.
There you go. Okay,
Tremendous.
That's what I wanted to see.
Arguably the best book on that time period.
Excellent. Great presentation. Thank you for your energy and your positivity.
Other questions?
Yeah. It was good the whole way. Now we're having some technical problems. I'm not sure why, but
wow.
Okay. But I think we're okay. Does anyone have a question? We'll give them 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to ask a question.
Fire away.
I thought it was extremely informative, and I think a lot of people are, oh, here's one.
Hanukkah traditions distinct to Wheeling. Well, many years ago, when Ogilvy started the Festival of Lights, in their very second year, they invited the community to participate. Many of us will remember businesses around town put up light displays, especially the ones on National Road, as the legions of tour buses would get off of the highway and trek at 2 miles an hour all the way up Bethany Pike. And Temple decided very early on to join in that first year that the community was invited to participate, which was actually year 2 of the event. Temple put up our menorah, and our giant out on the front lawn menorah has been up ever since. That's very much a Wheeling thing. We're quite proud of that.
Okay. Well, like I said, that was very informative, and I learned a lot, and I know a lot of other people did as well. They've been commenting about that. You may have seen. So delightful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored.
Well,
and to everyone, regardless of your faith, I wish you a very happy celebration of whatever you choose to celebrate this winter. But let's remember, there is no secular holiday. Holidays are holy days. So make it meaningful to you, to your family, to your friends and neighbors, and share your experiences rather than trying to water things down to make them acceptable to everyone. Let's meet our friends and neighbors where they truly are.
Excellent. Well put. That's a great point and a good place to end. Thank you, everyone who attended, and thank you, Rabbi. And we will see you next week for Beethoven's birthday. Goodbye, everyone.